Hey there, first grade. Miss Hershey here, and I am back with our second part of our chameleon project, our chameleon watercolor. So I have the drawing I did last time, and then I have my paints over here. And I also have some crayons. So you don't have to do the crayon part, but I'm going to just show you what you might want to do with your crayons. So I'm going to, I have a white. I'm going to use my white. I'm going to color in some parts of my chameleon. With the white, I'm going to do around his eye, maybe a little on his feet, just a little bit of white here and there just to kind of give that cool resist look. Remember, this will actually resist the color of the paint that we're putting on, which is kind of neat. Do a little white on these flowers in the middle. And then I'm going to pick my colors. So I'm going to make these flowers pink. So I'm going to do a little bit with some magenta crayon on them. Just some magenta crayon on them. And then a little bit of pink crayon too. Just kind of working it out towards the outside. Getting a good bit of color on there. And then I'm going to come in from the inside, or the outside I mean. Just to get some nice color in there. So now our chameleons, remember, they blend in. So we want him to look like he's blending with this flower. So this flower is going to be pink. I'm going to make some pink on my chameleon. And this isn't 100% how chameleons work, but we're going to, for today, say that this is how our chameleon's going to look. We want really cool, colorful chameleons. Okay, and maybe a little bit of the dark on there. Okay. Then our leaves, you can do brights, you can do darks, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to do a dark green. I'm just going to go right around the edges of my leaves, just to give sort of that cartoon outline look. So right along my Sharpie. And then, so his tail back here would probably be a little green. Right, dark green. And then my leaf over here, I've got these other leaves. So if I wanted to do something similar with my leaves, kind of just outline my different boxes. And I'm not doing a perfect job either. It's a little bit of a rough, ooh, I broke my crayon. It's a little bit of a rough look there. I'm gonna do it on both. And then maybe like just the tip of his nose is green because he's kind of getting near that plant. And maybe his little feet. Okay, for the stick, obviously we'll do some brown. Sticks are generally kind of brown in color. And then I'm going to do his feet a little brown and his legs. Maybe his tail a little, so he looks like he's blending into the stick. And then for the background, I'm just going to do, I don't know, I guess some crazy watercolor back there. So I think that's all I'm going to do for the crayon. I think I did tell you guys last week that you can have with you salt, marker, saran wrap. There's some different things. If you don't have them, you can go ahead and pause it now and get it. I'm going to go ahead and get some of that stuff now. So here I have some green markers. They're skinny, some skinny green markers. So I'm going to, on my background, I'm going to do some more leaf shapes. And this is kind of starting to die, but that's all right. And these are just going to be kind of messy, crazy leaves. And of course, I'm going very fast. So pause this video when you need to. I'm going to do one more kind of right there. Okay. And then maybe just a little bit of scribbles here and there, just to get some color on this paper before we start with our actual watercolor paper. You can also take really skinny markers and do some other lines. These are really skinny, so I don't know how they're going to work out for what we're doing. We'll give it a shot. Just do 2 down here. All right, so that was the marker. So I've got some marker on there, and I'll show you what that does. And then also salt and saran wrap. So I'm gonna give you a moment to gather your materials if you need them, and then we're going to move on. All right, so here I have this Jacquard silk salt. You don't need this. You can just use regular sea salt or table salt. And then I have, this is actually a plastic hairnet that I have, but just a thin piece of plastic. A Ziploc bag might be too thick, but like a sandwich baggie without a zipper would probably be thick enough, or just plastic wrap. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start using these things. So I'm gonna start first with my flower. So I have some magenta paint here. And I'm going to paint my flower, and you can see the crayon resist is starting already, which is really nice. I've got some white in there. I've got that stamen, that tall piece in the middle, that's staying white because I did that with the white crayon. The pink crayon is popping out, giving me some colors. And the dark crayon is mostly blending in, but that's okay. And then I want to paint my chameleon. So you can either do scales on him, or that's not really doing much, so I'm just going to paint him pink on the top here. So I'm painting him all pink on the top to match my flower. And that's that. If you wanted to do something crazy, add some stuff to your flower, you could take another color. So I'm going to take some red, and because it's already wet, it should just kind of work in nicely into that magenta. So this is wet on wet, and this is when you're mixing 2 wet types of paint together to create a new color or an effect. So I'm doing my wet on wet effect here, and it's really turning out quite beautiful. I really like that. I think that looks really nice. So that's a technique you can try. Now I'm gonna rinse my brush, and I'm gonna show you guys the marker technique. So what you can do is you can just take water and put it right on your marker, and your marker will do what we call bleeding. So that marker is bleeding into the water and spreading out all over my paper. And my marker lines are actually going to mostly disappear, which is fine. But that's a totally different effect right there. And you can see the skinnier lines aren't bleeding as much. That's sort of what I thought would happen. And then of course the crayon is gonna resist. We've already learned about resists before. So that gives this really pretty look back there that I really like. I like how that looks. It's a very watercolor look. The table got a little wet there. Okay, so that is a wet on wet and a marker bleed. So what we can do is we can do some more wet on wet. So I'm gonna get some more, I get like a blue-green going on here. And I'm just gonna kind of put my paint in and let it move around on its own, bleeding in. To those other colors. His body's starting to dry, so it's gonna be easier to paint around it now. And up around this leaf, I want it a little darker. I don't want it to look like I ignored anything. Oops, got a little pink in my green. Okay, so there is my background. Now, while it's still very wet, it has to be very wet for this next part to work. While it's still very wet, you can do your salt. So I'll do that now because then by the time the video's over, it should be starting to do what it's supposed to do. So I'm just gonna take a little salt and I'm gonna sprinkle it right in the wet parts of my painting. The paint has to be wet for it to work. If the paint is dry, it's not going to work. So just a couple sprinkles here and there. I'll put the rest back. So that's my salting, and you'll be able to see by the end what that looks like. But what it's going to do is the salt kind of sucks the color up, making it lighter around the salt and then very dark under the salt. I'm going to do my leaves dry brush, meaning I'm just going to get paint on the brush, watercolor paint, and I'm just going to paint them standard one color on the dry paper. That is just a dry brush technique. So you're just using a fairly dry brush on dry paper. So we're learning all types of watercolor techniques today. Learning a bunch. Okay, so here is this leaf. Done, easy peasy. And this leaf, done, easy peasy. That crayon's popping out, giving it a little texture, nice crayon resist. So this one's a 2 technique. It's got crayon resist and dry brush. Then the branch, same thing. It's gonna be just dry brush stroke of brown over that crayon. You can do your chameleon's feet brown, but if you don't want to, I understand it's not the most pretty color. I'm gonna do a little brown on him. Remember, I did some of that white crayon, so it's not taking 100% on him, but that's okay. So I'm doing a little bit of brown on him. And then I'm gonna make him sort of a yellow-green color, the rest of his body. So I'm gonna take that yellow-green and kind of go over everything I haven't done so far, because that's a very lizard color, I think. It's a color you would definitely think a lizard would be. I can paint right over his eye because I did that white crayon on it, so it's gonna resist it. And if it doesn't resist it perfectly, you can take your brush with a little water and clean it off. Okay, so you can see the salt starting to work. You can see these almost little starbursts forming. So now it's just mostly finishing my painting. So it's a little bit drier over here. I'm gonna work over here. This is very dry area. I haven't worked over here yet. I want these leaves to be a different color than the rest of them. So I'm gonna mix my 2 greens together. This is how we achieve lots of different greens. Lots of different colors is by combining colors. Ooh, and I got some red in my leaf there. Ooh, I got a lot of red in my leaf. A little bit too wet on my wet on wet. So I'm just gonna leave that. That's something that happens when you do watercolor, but I think it can actually lead to being very pretty. So I'm just gonna leave that how it is. I'm not too sad about it. I'm gonna do a dark blue-green over here. It's the jungle where this chameleon lives, and jungles are very dark because they have so many leaves, the sunlight can't always get through, so it's gonna be dark blue-green back here like jungle shadows. And then same thing down here, I'm gonna do this dark blue-green mixture sort of all over, and I wanna keep it pretty wet, so I've gotta work kind of fast. And I've gotta fill in the rest of my background, but you want it to stay wet. This is for the saran wrap technique that I'm gonna show you. Now, if you don't have saran wrap, don't worry about it, but if you do and you're gonna try the technique, you're going to want to work fast so that it stays wet. It only works when it's wet. That's just how the technique is. I didn't come up with it. It's just how it is. So the other thing is we're having this paint all bleed into each other. That's okay, because we do want our chameleon to be colorful and fun looking, and it's okay if he's kind of blending in with the background because that is what chameleons do. They change colors. So it's all right if he blends in a little bit. So you see I've got my wet area down here, so I'm going to take my hairnet. I am going to cut the elastic off to make it easier to work with. You're going to take your plastic wrap and you're going to smush it onto your painting, and you're going to let it dry. This effect you won't be able to see today. You'll have to wait until tomorrow to see this effect, but it's going to dry with these areas being light and dark. It's going to be really neat. If you look at it, you can see there's a big light spot right here, this kind of like wave going up, and right here. Those are going to dry light, and then these dark edges are actually going to dry darker. What we can now see is that the wet on wet is drying into each other, making these beautiful bleed marks. And then the salt, you can see where it started to dry. You can see these little starbursts, and you can peel the salts right off if you want. But they look like little starbursts is what I think. I think they look like little stars in the sky. It's a really pretty technique. So yeah, you're just going to let this guy dry overnight. He's going to end up pretty cool, I think. I think you'll like him. I will take a picture of mine and post it when it's done. I think I am going to take a little bit more saran wrap and put it up at the side there where there's kind of some room right here. Yeah, all right, I think I'm good now. So I will post a photo of this when it's done on Schoology for you guys to look at. Pretty excited to share it with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. This was a fun one. Bye.